Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm Eve Ekman, Marianne's daughter. So happy to be here with you all. Such a wonderful time to celebrate with so many people in this room who love my mom, just like me. And a real opportunity to reflect on what mattered most to her. And I'll just spend a couple moments introducing us here. But my dad is here with us. Yes. And our whole family, even those who couldn't make it, are just so grateful for Berkeley, for Paula, for Christina. Thank you so much for being here and making this event so special. My mom would love this gathering. She would love it. She not only really loved this place, UC Berkeley, she loved the Women's Faculty Club. You know, she really understood what it meant to have a space for women and for women's scholarship, and a place for support, a place for care, a place for connection. I remember her bringing me here, and when she would come here, she would completely light up. It just felt like this was her place. She could completely be herself and feel connected and cared for. And my mom, you know, like so many of the people in this room, she was a pioneer. You know, she was so determined to let her thirst and fire for knowledge lead. She tells me stories about when she was graduating from Vassar, and her beloved Vassar classmates, all of them had an engagement ring before graduation day. And the expectation was that was their next career move, right? And for her to move forward, again, like so many people in this room, is what has allowed the rest of us to stand on your shoulders. And as a woman, I'm just so grateful for all those doors that have been opened by my mom, by Paula, Christina, by so many who've come through this building. And so it's really beautiful to be here. When she first applied to be a Berkeley professor, truly her lifelong dream, there was worry that she was too old to be a professor at that time. Little did they know that soon she'd be running the place. And you know, her joy, of course, with her students, but somewhat to her surprise, she loved administration, because you could make such a difference for women in that role, changing policies, looking at data, trying to close the gap in that pipeline between the amazing proportion of graduate students who are women and the staggering small amount of women who are faculty. And the work she started, the work many of you have been involved in, is ongoing. I know it would be hard for her to have seen the overturn of Roe versus Wade. Hard for all of us. There's so much work to be done, which is why we need times like this afternoon to really enrich ourselves, not only with knowledge, but connection and support. It's such an honor to be here with Christina, who was on my dissertation committee, not only a wonderful, accomplished faculty member that we'll hear more about, and also Jody Halpern was on my dissertation committee, so I feel so held as a graduate and alum of Berkeley with these incredible women who showed me support and also rigor, what it means to really stand up for your ideas, but place them in an important setting where they can be utilized well. I love that the topic today is stress and burnout. I think it's so meaningful and important for our time to really address the weight and the burden of stress on everyday life. And I think it's so meaningful that we're here talking about stress and burnout, because I'm sure, as Christina will share, one of the great remedies or antidotes to stress and burnout is social connection. And so with that, just thank you so much for being here today. So grateful to be here in this room, to be honoring my mom, and look forward to connecting with you all after at the reception. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eve. I mean, you said so many things that I wish I had said, but I will say a couple more things about Marianne before I introduce Christina. It's hard to believe that she has been gone now for almost 4 years. But she does still hover over this place. As you said it about running it, and so she still hovers. She hovers over the campus where she was the first woman dean of the graduate school, and where she introduced really important policy changes regarding families. And she hovers over legal studies at the university. She did so much work on women in the law, family law, children and the law, and over the social welfare school where she worked for many, many, many years. And she hovers very, very closely above this building, as Eve was suggesting. It's, from a personal point of view, it's a place that I always loved having lunch with her, and which she loved being part of. But she also helped to develop this place as an institution. She was on the committee that helped to raise money for us, and we made our goal of over $1 million at the 100th anniversary. She was out there doing her thing. So she is beloved by so many of us. But I also want to thank Eve and Paul Ekman, who made the contributions to make this series possible. Not only the series, but the reception that you're all welcome to join us in. Now I'd like to introduce Christina Maslach, who was part of our group that got to know each other here in this building as we were trying to raise money for the organization. It was a group that included Christina, who is now, among the many hats that she wears, she presides over the board of directors of the Women's Faculty Club. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce her. I want to say a few words about her extraordinary career. Christina Maslach grew up in Berkeley, and after she got her AB from faraway Harvard Radcliffe College in 1967, she came back to California to get her PhD, no hisses please, at Stanford in 1971. But then she returned permanently to Berkeley, where she had joined the psychology department, and here's just a little footnote to that. She was the first woman hired in the psychology department for 50 years. And she has remained there ever since. She's now a professor emerita. Christina has done pioneering research on the definition, predictors, and measurement of job burnout. She created the Maslach Burnout Inventory, MBA, familiarly known, and has written numerous books, including The Truth About Burnout, and most recently, The Burnout Challenge in 2022. It was a book that drew wide attention and praise. Her work has earned her many rewards, as well as recognition. This is very special, from the World Health Organization. And she was named one of the top 100 people transforming business in Business Insider in 2021. And she received in 2020 an award for scientific writing by the National Academy of Sciences. Her achievements don't stop there. She received the Professor of the Year Award in 1997. She was Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education and twice Chair of the Faculty Academic Senate at Berkeley. A truly Renaissance woman for whom scholarship, teaching, and service have been intertwined in a lifetime of achievement. It is my great honor to introduce to you Christina Maslach, who will speak to us today on women and burnout.
Well, thank you so much. Now, after I've had all these wonderful introductions, if my mom were here, I would just say, "Can I sit down now?" I'm okay. So thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's an honor for me to be able to do this talk today. Hopefully it's going to change. Maybe it won't. There we go. To do this talk today, a talk in honor of Marianne Mason as part of the series that the Ekman family has set up for us here. And what I wanted to do was take my inspiration from some of the work that I think is so important that Marianne did. And her focus, was on women and family and children. And she's really, in that sense, looking at what is happening and what are some of the obstacles and some of the problems that come in terms of the lives that women can lead during this part of adulthood, when women are, choosing to be involved in having families. But a period that does not fit in well. It has a mismatch between the working world, the career world, and family, and it doesn't. And so this gap, this mismatch, this misfit is something that I have found really important as a sort of structural concept in the work that I do on stress and job burnout. So that was what I'm taking off from, is the work that she did, and I'll allude to it a little bit as I go through. And I will add some other things to it. Now, I don't want you to be scared by this when I say I'm going to add stuff on aging. Not everything about aging, it would take a long time. Not everything about sex and gender, but selected things that I think are particularly important, certain themes that I will get to. So I will be picking up on a number of other important things. Oh, okay.
Gina, click on the slideshow so that the slide that you're showing fills the entire screen.
It's still the same.
Since I work in a technology company, maybe.
Go down to
You
the
got it?
bottom corner there.
Yeah, it wasn't moving.
Click on this.
Oh, you got it?
There you go.
Start all over again.
Okay, good, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I want to begin with a few things, not that you don't know about this, but I want to talk about the significance of some of this. And when we think about what is happening with women, why are they sort of out of sync with other things in life that they could be doing, we need to look at their biological sex differences. People say women are so different from men, okay? And this is the reason why a lot of institutions have one sex, not the other, etc. So let's just review quickly what those are. And they all relate to reproduction. And I remember learning this in classes early on, biology and stuff like that. There are 4 key differences between males and females that one sex has and the other one doesn't. So men have 1, they can impregnate, they're the keepers of the sperm. But women have 3, and what are those? Well, they menstruate, men don't. Okay, so their body is preparing a place for a new being to grow. But think about that, all of you who are women in here, when you begin to menstruate in your life, all of a sudden you're realizing it's changing. Some of that is exciting. I remember my daughter saying, "Hello, fellow woman," yay, it started. And then the next day, "Oh my God, you didn't tell me about this," and so it's something that happens every month, and it's going to happen for many years. And sometimes it's painful, and sometimes it's stressful, and it's, oh my gosh, the bathroom doesn't have what I need right now, all those kind of things. So that happens. You can gestate. That means you're keeper of the eggs. You are the one that is going to create a new human being inside your body. Okay, and that can happen. And then finally, you lactate. You can provide the food that the new infant is going to need. And what's interesting about this is that because of those differences, people have often made men and women be like really opposing opposite sexes, that they have nothing in common, that there's something very different. Why can't a woman be more like a man? That sort of thing. First off, I want to say there's one thing that they forgot, and that is when they say there's a 4th difference with women, and that is that all of that stuff that they have, those 3, stops at some point. It doesn't happen anymore. As far as I know, men doesn't stop. You can keep on going, for a long, long time. And again, when I talk with many women about this is sometimes an experience which was, maybe sad, thinking I'm not going to have any more kids, but actually now I don't want any more kids. I thought it was just going to stop. Doesn't stop. It goes through a very difficult period for some women before, and finally you're saying, please go away, you know, and have that stop. So I mention all this because there are things that are happening. When it stops, it's another way of saying the period they can bear children only is for a certain period. It's not their whole life. But careers start earlier. And so we have a particular example of a mismatch in academia, which is coming in as a professor, being evaluated for tenure at the same time that you are able to have children. And if you're going to do that, you've got this problem. Marianne really recognized that, gathered a lot of data about that, and as I will show you later, did some very important work in that regard. So this is the kind of non-overlapping normal distributions for men and women that people carry around in their heads. And that is, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. You know, you used to hear that. They are different, really different. And if men are more or can do something that women can't, then that's the reason why women can't apply, women can't do that job, they are not eligible or qualified. And it's interesting to say, because of the reproductive differences, it goes that far that we're going to see these as two very, very different people. I mean, this club was founded because women faculty could not go to the faculty club. They were turned away. So over 100 years, they had another place. And I'm thinking, having lunch is a problem, you know, with women sitting at the same table. I mean, we're not reproducing right now. So what is, you know, what is this about? But I say that because I think this kind of thinking is so embodied and ingrained in the way the world treats men and women that it explains why we still have to deal with things like Eve mentioned, you know, striking down Roe versus Wade. Why? You know, what is the thing that we're trying to achieve here? My last name, if you don't know it, is Polish, and my grandparents were immigrants here, and so I was back in Poland in the early 90s when, you know, they were free from communist rule, they were starting new things and whatever. One of the first things the new government did, they banned abortion. I was there when that happened, and it was just, you're doing what? I mean, this is what, helping the economy? This is what, I mean, why are we doing this? And it has had a devastating effect on men, women, families since then. It's still one of the worst things. And so when I heard about Roe versus Wade, I'm thinking, are we turning backwards? I'm beginning to hear people, you know, leaders and stuff talking about women belong in the kitchen. And it's like, what is going on? But if we think of these men and women as so different, that it's easier to think of discriminating, of not allowing them to be a part of things, and so forth. So we really need to be sort of changing the dialogue around this. In truth, if you look at research on gender differences, you get overlapping distributions. That's really what you see, and sometimes they are way more overlapping than even this one. This one is on height, but the point is when they're overlapping, that you see there's more in common that men and women share. So not all men are taller than women. On average, they are more tall, but there's short guys, there's tall guys, there's short women, there's tall, you know. And when we talk about gender, we're really talking about things that are not necessarily biologically, you know, created in charge, but if there's a stimulus, it's a woman or a man, and then we use that as a thing to teach them this way, teach them a different way. Jean Block, who was a colleague of mine, did some wonderful research where she had parents helping their little child, either little son or daughter, on a very difficult task. So they'd be sitting there, and after a while the child would have a lot of problems. And so what would the dad do? What would the mom do? They're actually more similar than they were different. And when it's a little girl and she's saying, oh, I can't do this. Oh, come on, honey, that's okay. Look, I'll help you. We don't want to bother about that. You know, don't cry, don't cry. If it was a little boy, oh, come on, son, you got to try again. You got to do it differently. So the biological sex was the marker that stimulates a whole different world that children grow up in. And the other thing I wanted to point out with this is that years ago, we had this thing where we began to focus more on what was called bona fide occupational qualifications, BFOQ, which basically said not that if It used to be that only men were hired to be firefighters and not women. And one of the reasons was because men have upper body strength, in greater body strength than women, and women wouldn't be able to drag the hoses around. There's a test. And when you say it's a bona fide occupational qualification, you say it doesn't matter if it's men or women, whoever can pass the test. Because there are some women, like in the overlapping, who are on the higher side of it and could do that. And I think as we began to sort of see that you can't just say men are stronger and then therefore women don't, aren't admitted or aren't qualified, but have them do the test, and those who can do it, they're qualified to go on. The other thing that I think was important in gender differences happened in the early 70s, and this was Sandra Bem and a lot of other people who talked about psychological androgyny. It used to be that when you thought about gender, masculinity and femininity, it was assumed that masculine had to be what men did and femininity was what women did. But the traits that are positively valued for women, like being compassionate and warm and all that kind of thing, they're good for women. Why aren't they good for men as well? And vice versa. And what began to happen was to see that actually people could be androgynous, have some of both, rather than very, more stereotypically one or the other. And it really began to open up how we understood men and women and their lives in various ways. So this is actually the overlapping, and sometimes very overlapping, distributions are a much better way of, in research, finding quote unquote differences or not between males and females, and emphasize the importance of what is shared in common. I think in general, the more we think of any kind of other person as totally unlike us, we lose the commonality, the things that we share. And we need to be much more aware of that as we go on. So, just a little background on how we think about sex, because that obviously is relevant for the stress one. But now just to talk about some basics about stress. World Health Organization just came out with a statement. A state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Stress is a natural response that prompts us to address challenges and threats in our lives. Okay? So there's a couple points I want to just emphasize there. It's a natural response. This is something all humans have. It is not bad, it is not a problem, it is not a disease, it is not an illness. If we did not have a stress response, the threats would have wiped us off the face of the earth very quickly. So we need this. And people who are trying to make job burnout a pathology, want to have it as a illness and have its own little, thing, DSM, where we are now, 7 or something, are missing the point. This is not a pathology. Thank God we have a stress response. The other thing I want to point out is the difference of threats and challenges. And this was work done here on the Berkeley campus by Richard Lazarus, who was an important mentor for me. And his team really making the distinction that stress is good sometimes because there are challenges. There are things that we have to rise to the occasion and deal with, something new, and we're learning how to do that. And that stresses the body, but then we recover from that, and we now have a new skill, or we've done a new experience, or something like that. If we perceive it as a challenge, we see it as something, wow, I haven't done this before, but I think I could. Maybe give it a try. If you see this thing as, oh my God, are you kidding me? I'm going to be, I can't do this. That's a threat. And it's in our heads, it's a cognitive kind of thing, but we're more likely to move forward on the challenge and try it. With the threat, we're more likely to get the fight, flight, or freeze response. And so these are really important distinctions to realize what is it that people are responding to. And again, the stress response, it makes your whole body, mind, everything ready to take action of some kind. And so it affects all kinds of systems, everything, within the body, to make it ready to run, or ready to fight, or ready to, to do whatever. It has to be followed by recovery. You cannot be in a stress mode all the time. And what's important about this, if you're going to look at where the problem is, it's not that we have a stress response, it's that we don't recover well from that, and that's where all the problems come from. And so, if it doesn't recover well, that's where we get all the negative effects. It leads to physical disease, greater risk of heart attacks. It leads to all kinds of other things. It can lead to depression. It can lead to anxiety. So this is why we care about it. The word stress, I should have mentioned, I don't know if people know this, but it came from physics and was applied to human beings. And the definition was, let me get it here, a force that produces strain on a physical body. Okay, so it's like if you bending a piece of metal, or at what point does the bridge break and doesn't hold the weight on it or something like that. And so the fact that the word stress gets used to mean so many different things has led people to try and differentiate. The job is stressful, I'm feeling stressed out. So stressors are usually the term being used for what is causing the problem. Okay, what is it in the job? What is it in the family life? What is it about somebody attacking you? The stressors. The strain is what you're experiencing. Okay, so, and again, when you read a lot of the literature, that's trying to make it clarify what we mean by stress, which is sort of the whole big umbrella sort of term for all of this. So we're talking about the difference between causes and effects, on this, the stressors and then what happens, and that there is a negative stress, distress, there's a positive stress, eustress, and there's challenges and there's also threats. So it's very complicated, and to give a simple answer to all of this is not sort of the way to go here. There are different types of stressors. Basic types are acute. Acute usually is very specified in time and place in terms of what it is. And acute is often where more of the challenges are. So it's, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this new thing in the gym and really push myself until I can really get there, okay? It's a stress response to that, but it stops and then you recover. And those, so they can be positive. They happen all the time during our lives. Episodic means that it comes at certain times. April is hell month for tax accountants. I mean, and it's going to come every year, and it's going to be now, and this is the month where, sort of thing, you've got to be ready for it. Chronic, and this is what I investigate in job burnout, chronic means it's there all the time. You don't get away from it. You think you've dealt with it, and you go back to work the next day, it's back, they're still there, and it's the pebbles in your shoe that have just not gotten out of there. So chronic is the important negative one because we don't recover well from chronic. Chronic means you're under stress most of the time. You don't get back to normal. You don't get back to health, and that's difficult. And then the common elements. I mean, what Eve might think is stressful, I'll think, oh no, that's a piece of cake, no problem. Well, what are the common elements? Because why are we responding to it differently? And research, with the acronym NUTS, is saying when it's novel, something new, you hadn't expected, haven't done before. If it's unpredictable, you don't know what is going to happen. And, could it be good, could it be bad? It's a threat to the ego, it's an attack, I'm going to be embarrassed and humiliated, or, somebody's going to go after me. And you don't have much control over it, okay, that sense of control. And those are the sort of the four things that usually characterize what we think of as those stressors that can cause stress. And the stages, the alarm, that's usually where the fight and flight begins to start. When you first encounter the stressor, there's resistance to that. And if you don't do well in resisting, you get exhaustion, and that's kind of the stage that we see with, say, job burnout on this. Okay, I'm just throwing this in here because I think this kind of thing gets, the data on things like this get misused. I just heard somebody who was speaking to Stanford graduating students who is like a tech millionaire, and he is wishing them pain and suffering and a lot of stress in their life because, he said, that's the only way you're going to get ahead and be successful. That builds character. I had to go through that, and he's a millionaire. So what he is, aside from using an N of one, me, kind of thing, what he's doing is not paying attention to 3 of the 4 cells in a 2x2, which is the easiest way to present this. The one I'm showing you is good, but it's showing the importance of control as well as demands in job stress. So you've got, people were saying, well, if you have high workload and lots of strain, a lot of stressors going out there, you're going to be, have a bad time. Well, it turns out, no, you don't. Some people thrive under those conditions. What is the difference? Turns out how much control you have over the work you do. So this is low and high demands and low and high control. And what you can see is that when you have high demands and high control, that is really great. People love that work, they're engaged, they feel good about it, they work hard, etc. If they have high demands, low control over their work, that's the high stress job. So it's really both of those things. And so the tech millionaire, whatever, is ignoring what happens to people who don't have pain, suffering, stress. Do none of them become millionaires and financially successful? What about, the people who, how many who have it actually come out the way he does? And so data that gets presented this way sometimes gets misused in terms of talking about stress, but also talking about men and women. So a little digression there. Okay, understanding burnout. A syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stressors that have not been successfully managed. A couple of things, this again, World Health Organization, which came out with this in 2019, along with COVID-19, I might add. First, chronic job stressors. That's what's so important about it. It's chronic. These are stressors that people talk about as being there all the time. They don't get dealt with, and it's harder to recover from that. So that's why burnout becomes not just a synonym for stress or I'm kind of tired or having a bad day. It is that you are not recovering from the stress response that keeps you going all the time. Second thing I want to point out is the phrase that have not been successfully managed. The roots are in the management of the work environment. And it's actually a positive phrase. They could be successfully managed, right? It says they haven't been, but they could be. And of course people saying, well, who should be doing the managing? Well, basically the answer is everybody, the worker, the team, the manager, the supervisor, the HR person, the CEO, everybody has a role to play in making the environment as healthy and effective so that people thrive and grow and do well, rather than have chronic stress that they don't recover well from. 3 dimensions of burnout, and this keeps coming out in translations and research around the world on this, which is what was the basis for the WHO. 1, feeling exhaustion. That's the stress response. But it's not just the stress response, it's 2 other things happen. Increased distancing or feelings of negativity about the job. A little country western song, take this job and shove it, okay? That's the kind of thing that's happening. People are beginning to say, why am I here? Why am I doing this? They don't know how to run this place. Why don't they make it better? Da, 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 da. And they're just pulling out. And what they do when this happens is they shift from doing their very best to doing the bare minimum. So the quality of the work, the productivity and so forth, goes downhill. And then the third thing that happens is not only do they feel negative about the job, but then they turn it on themselves and say, what's wrong with me? Why can't I take it? Maybe I should have been doing something else. I made a mistake being here. I'm not proud of what I've done. All of these kind of things. So it's that trifecta. You're stressed, you're feeling negative about yourself, and you're feeling negative about the job. That is really what we talk about as burnout. It's called an occupational phenomenon, and World Health is very adamant. It is not a medical condition. It can have health outcomes. It can lead to depression. It can lead to cardiovascular problems or whatever. But in and of itself, it's not. So, just a quick summary of causes and solutions for job burnout. What we have been finding in the research is that it's this fit between job and the person, or the match between the job and the person that I mentioned earlier with Mary Ann's work. And if it fits well, people do well, thrive, feel good about the job. If there's really mismatches going on, then we have problems. So on the left with the red letters, these are 6 areas that we find where mismatches are clear predictors of job burnout. Demand overload. What this means is demands are high, but the resources are low. You don't have the time, the people, the equipment, etc. to do the job well. Lack of control, I sort of mentioned that earlier. Insufficient reward. It's not just pay and benefits, it's that you are not even getting recognized, social recognition, other people patting you on the back or saying, oh my God, thank God you were there, you saved that meeting, you know, kind of thing. A breakdown of the workplace community. This is what people are talking about now as socially toxic. That you don't know who to talk to, who is not going to spread the word, throw you under the bus, try to get you out of the way. You feel isolated even in the midst of many. You need help, advice, a mentor. Who do you go to? You don't feel it. And so this is where harassment lies. This is where treating people badly and not really as colleagues and so forth is really important. Absence of fairness. This is where drives the cynicism, really sky high. That whatever the rules, whatever the policy, we don't follow it. And the people who don't deserve the rewards, are the ones who are getting them, or the people who don't, deserve promotions are the ones, or so forth. And then finally, value conflicts, where people find themselves ethically challenged. I have to say this and it's not true, or I can't say we're doing something wrong because it'll look bad, or other kinds of things like that. On the blue side are just ways I've talked about. This is what you do with the organizations, is can you pivot to what is the positive opposite goal that you would like to get to? So if it's demand overload, how can we get a sustainable workload? How do we make progress towards that? How do we build an appropriate choice and control over the job? Recognition, reward, a supportive work community, fairness, and clear values and meaningful work. And again, when you look at it, it's not an either or proposition. It's both the job and the people and the kind of work we do, and how do we get it so that it's a better fit and the people that are hired to do the work here are doing well and are glad they're there. So this is really a lot of what's in my work is, these kind of 6 areas and how we work with those. And one of the things that is important is that there's a bias, I will say, in this country and in others as well, that what we're going to do is help individual people. How do we help them cope with the stress? And we have a self-care industry that's remarkable in this country in terms of people and resources and things that could help people feel better and be able to handle it and keep going and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with that, except it doesn't address changing what's causing the stress in the first place. And we need to be doing that as well. So burnout research, but also a lot of organizational research that's been done for decades now, has a response that you need to modify the environmental stressors. What's happening in this situation? They're the sources of the problem. How do we make burnout less of a problem? How do we not lose people through sick leave and absenteeism and doing bad work and turnover and all the rest of it? And so we really need to be looking at both of these things, not just the one. So when we talk about situational changes and so forth, again, I want to go back to Mary Ann, because what she did was actually try and change the environment for people so that they could have family and work. Paula and I interviewed her as part of a study we did on academic pioneers, women who joined Berkeley faculty in the 1970s, 80s, kind of thing. And we were asking Mary Ann about her work, and I asked her what was the high point you know. And she said the high point was when I got a call from a woman named Sarah. And I was like, oh, okay, what is that? And it was Sarah Brady, who was the assistant to Susan Bonilla, I think, or something like that, who was a state representative in California. And Sarah said, we love your work, we want to do something, can you come and we can help you write a bill that will go to the California State Legislature. And Marianne went to Sacramento, she worked with him, she wrote a bill, she testified in front of different committees, the legislature passed it, and it made all graduate students and postdocs who were in programs in California had a year leave when they became parents. It applied to women and men both. So that she's changing the environment. She's making it possible that they're not going to be, oh my gosh, you got a child, you're not going to be in the lab, not being productive, gone, you're out of here. No, they could stay. And then she, took that and helped make it as policy for faculty here at UC Berkeley, and that became a standard for a lot of universities across the country. So Marianne, is someone who is not just about helping people deal with it or cope with it or whatever, but we're going to change it so that you don't have that problem, that you can go ahead and have a family and have your work as well. And I want to say that in a lot of the research that I do with organizations, that's part of the problem, is working with them, because they often think like the job is what it is. I mean, how can you change the job? You can change it in a lot of different ways, and you have to adapt as well. And there was one instance on this campus where we worked with a large organization of about 1,000 people, and it turned out the thing that really got people angry and upset and stressed out was a Distinguished Service Award. You're thinking, really? An award? What's the matter here? People hated that award, everybody hated that award. And I remember the boss, the CEO coming in saying, well, I can't understand, why are people upset? I mean, do we not give them enough money? And I said, it was not a reward issue. They rated it as bad because it was unfair. Unfair, again, who was getting the award? Not the people who deserved it. And it was just sticking in everybody's craw. They changed the rules for distinguished service. So a team, not just the leader, people from all parts of the organization. And within a year, when we went back to gather more data, that fairness issue was gone. I mean, people were, and furthermore, they had optimism about, well, if we could fix that, we could fix this other problem over here. So there was a thing like, okay, now we're working on another issue. This one is taken care of, and so forth. So the things I want to say about not just more specific things on doing things to deal with stress, but there's a theme here, which is you're doing things to promote positivity and well-being. Make more good things happen in your life, and it is possible to do that in a lot of different ways. I went to Emerson Elementary School in Berkeley here when I was growing up, and I learned about Emerson, Ralph Waldo, and I found out he had a lot to say about a lot of things that I did research on. And so when I checked on him, he had this one: for every minute you are angry, you will lose 60 seconds of happiness. Well, as we age, we don't want to be losing any more than we need to. So it's kind of like, think about what you can do that builds in more of that positive and happiness experiences. And a lot of what I will just mention briefly here, I want to add, you can find in this book by my colleague at UC San Francisco, Alyssa Eppel. And it's called, let me show you here, 7 Days to More Joy and Ease, The Stress Prescription. And a lot of good stuff in that, and I'll just give you a few examples. The first one is awe. Okay, and there's a book called Awe now, out by my colleague in psychology, Dacher Keltner. And he has been studying awe experiences, and when you think of that, some incredible thing, oh my God, you think often of nature, like the first time you see the Grand Canyon, or you walking through an incredible forest, or, this kind of thing. And what it does to you, it brings joy and happiness and feeling like, oh, everything else is kind of small to all of this, sort of thing. And what he has shown in his research is that it changes how your body is functioning. It helps with your heart rate, your blood pressure, all of this kind of thing. So the recovery part of stress is, accentuated positively by these kinds of things. He even did things like take a group of veterans who were suffering from PTSD out on a wilderness trip, and their symptoms dropped by 30%. So he's saying, I think we've got something going here that can be used in ways that help people build a stronger, better, happier life, which actually helps their well-being as well and helps with the recovery from stress. The importance of social relationships. I cannot underline this enough, and Eve referred to it as well. Everything can be better with other people, and having people in your life that can kind of do good things for you and you for them. And a lot of what we talk about and what we work with in there is how to make those more effective and better. Because the other thing is that our wonderful mind, which can do all kinds of great things, can also do bad things to us. And I'll mention those in a minute. We wanted to focus on what's positive in terms of these social relationships. I just want to mention briefly a lovely quote that I like from Marcel Proust. Let us be grateful for the people who make us happy. They are the charming gardeners who make our souls blossom. And that's really what we do for each other in terms of friendship, in terms of family, in terms of neighborly thing, in terms of colleagues, and all kinds of things. And there are little things that we may discover in our lives that actually do this. And so how do you get more positive responses from other people? One of the things that I learned early on in my life is that I had gone and bought an outfit that I thought was really kind of cool, but everyone said, oh, it's not your color, and et cetera. And it was a lemon yellow two-piece outfit, sort of a pencil skirt and a big, kind of top, and you could have scarves and jewelry and stuff like that. Every time I wore that dress, without fail, people came up to me and said, oh my God, Christina, you're looking so good today. Wow, that's very cool. I kind of, that really works for you. And it came, like, not only do I wear this on a special occasion when I have to give a big talk or something like that, if I was just having a lot of, oh my gosh, students are complaining about the class, we have this problem, that problem, it's a yellow dress day. Yellow dress day meant I will wear this dress and I can guarantee it never failed. People came up and complimented me. I mean, not just, oh, good to see you. It's like, wow, that dress, you're looking good. Thank you. Okay, I'll keep going. So there are a lot of things that we can do that are positive behaviors, that elicit positive behaviors from other people. And the thing that happens with that is when we do this, and people talk about being positive, being optimistic, when you start smiling more, when you're giving other kinds of things to that, it's actually changing how your body functions. And it stimulates what is neurotransmitters associated with mood regulation and well-being and reduced anxiety. People often call these feel-good hormones. It's not exactly right, but at any rate. But the thing is, there are things like serotonin, which is linked to emotions and mood, or endorphins, which cause feelings of, euphoria and prevents, pain. Dopamine, that shot of, whoa, pleasure, kind of thing. And how do you build in more moments with other people and just in your life where you get more of that? Because it actually does good things for your body and for your recovery from any kind of stress. There's recommendations about give yourself something good 3 times a day. Make sure you have 3 things that give you some good things during the day. Remember them at night, and et cetera, what you did for yourself. The one I can guarantee that works the best, I think, is laughter. Never fails. It will have an effect on you, and it's better to be laughing with other people. Usually that will stimulate more, than just by yourself. But that certainly generates the kind of dopamine that we're talking about. And I just want to remind you of a song some of you will know from the King and I musical. Whenever I feel afraid, I hold my head erect and whistle a happy tune so no one will suspect I'm afraid. And it goes on with other things, casual pose and all this kind of thing. The result of this deception is very strange to tell, for when I fool the people I fear, I fool myself as well. Well, it turns out there's a greater wisdom in that. It's not as you're fooling yourself, I'm whistling, I'm smiling, whatever. It's actually making your body, get better and clean up and, have those good things happen in your life. So I just thought that was a cute sort of understanding about all of that. Aging and stress. So I'm going to say something about that. And what we see, the not so good news, is that as people age, they become slower to recover. It just takes you longer to recover. It takes you longer to get the blood pressure going back down or the heart rate going back down. Tissues are getting less flexible, heart tissue and stuff like that. So it does, when they're stressed, it's taking stuff more. This may be exacerbated because they are more likely to have chronic stressors, and again, all the time. So those could be health issues, those could be financial, they could be social. We're talking about a loneliness epidemic in many places now, that people don't have other people. So there could be these kind of problems, and harder, again, from these chronic problems to recover well. And this is why physical exercise is so rated up #1, A+ for this, because it's getting your body moving, it's helping the body to kind of clean up what's there to get a little bit better. And this is why it's really necessary at this point. The better news is that it turns out that older people they don't get so stressed out by life as younger ones do. And why is that? When we saw the COVID pandemic, who was at greater risk for getting sick with COVID and maybe dying? Elderly, okay? But all the research is showing that they were not actually getting as stressed out by it as younger ones were. So these are 3 things that I think they have people who are elderly have, and that is basically wisdom. You've had a long life. You've gone through a lot. You've had different experiences. You've figured out what the small stuff is that you don't have to worry about, whether this is important or not. Will it be, oh my God, I'm so distressed about this. In 5 years, are you even going to worry about this or know what happened? No, let it go. So self-knowledge as well that they've learned, and time perspective. There's a sense of not just being in the present, but having what is it you can look back in your past and have learned from and feel good about and proud of, and not worrying about the anxieties of the future. It's kind of like, what have I done? What's my legacy? What am I doing things? If I had all the time in the world, would I do what I'm doing now? This kind of thing. So all of these mean that in many ways, older people do have a kind of wisdom to not get as thrown by stressors as they might, which I think is really sort of fascinating. And the other thing about aging is people realizing that there may be coming, memento mori, that this will be the end of life. And finding inner peace at this point is, as they say, a journey, not a destination. And so when you look at the literature, this is a lot of what you see. What can help you with this? Let go of social comparisons. Okay, you're always looking at, I didn't do as much as that person, I'm not as rich as they are, I don't have the whatever, I should have done whatever. It's not taking you anywhere, it's not helping you, so enough already. You've done what you needed to do before. Let go of grudges. When I said the mind, our fabulous human mind, and it can remember and do all kinds of things, it can make bad stuff in the past last forever. And you have a grudge, maybe you had a fight with a friend or a family member, and you still go over it. I know people who live it as though it happened and it was back in 1963, and they're still, kind of thing. You make it alive, you make these things that aren't, really helping you. They're taking your 60 seconds of happiness every minute that you spend on it. Why, Don't overthink everything. At some point, too much is too much, and you need to, sort of calm down and sort of, what is the most critical stuff here? Increase your self-care. People tend to begin to think, well, I don't have to bother with this, and so it's important to take care of yourself. It's not selfish. It's actually keeping you in good shape, and you with everybody else, those social connections that are important. living in a positive time perspective. I gave that example before, that when you see people who are living in a negative one, that's in the past, they're recalling all the bad stuff that happened and they can't get rid of it. But you want to look back on what was happy, what was good, what am I proud of, feel good about in terms of what I did or my family or whatever. And the same in terms of the moment, enjoy what it is. And stop being too hard on yourself. I see people often, kind of saying, oh my gosh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, being negative about who they are, rather than sort of saying, okay, how are people going to remember you when you're no longer here? What do you want them to think about? That I was kind, that I was, brave, that I was courageous, that I, what are the things that, are really important for you? It's not what you accumulate, it's what you've contributed, what you have done. And this is a wonderful time, again, to kind of get that more positive perspective on everything I am and have been at this point. So I want to finish with something that was given to me by one of my dear friends in Italy many years ago. And I have just found that there are many women who have, reacted to this. So I'd like to read it. It's a nun's prayer. It's from a nun in, I believe, the Netherlands in the 17th century. And it started getting translated in around the 18th century. Don't know much about the nun, whether it was one or several people or whatever. But her prayer, I think, captures a lot of what I was trying to share with you today. Behold, keep me from the fatal habit of thinking I must say something on every subject and on every occasion. Release me from craving to straighten out everybody's affairs. Make me thoughtful but not moody, helpful but not bossy. With my vast store of wisdom, it seems a pity not to use it all, but thou knowest, Lord, that I want a few friends at the end. Keep my mind free from the recital of endless details. Give me wings to get to the point. Seal my lips on my aches and pains. They are increasing, and love of rehearsing them is becoming sweeter as the years go by. I dare not ask for grace enough to enjoy the tales of others' pains, but help me to endure them with patience. I dare not ask for improved memory, but for a growing humility and lessening cocksureness when my memory seems to clash with the memories of others. Teach me the glorious lesson that occasionally I may be mistaken. Keep me reasonably sweet. I do not want to be a saint. Some of them are so hard to live with. But a sour old person is one of the crowning works of the devil. Give me the ability to see good things in unexpected places and talents in unexpected people. And give me, O Lord, the grace to tell them so. Amen. Thank you very much, and I suggest we go and have wine and de-stress. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, questions before we have wine? Okay. Any questions? Yes, Phil.
Chris, we're sitting here in the university. Do you have some thoughts about what the university can do to lower burnout and stress?
Among all, staff and faculty and et cetera, kind of thing. Yeah, it's interesting because I haven't done a lot of work within academic institutions about this. It's been, where people have wanted it is elsewhere. But I think taking the lessons that we've gotten from that and then saying, what does this look, what is the generic thing that we've found, how does it look, within an academic, kind of situation. So one of the things that I think can happen that people complain about is that people don't always treat each other well, and the norm in some cases is to be very criticizing and picking on details and what's wrong and not on what's right. How often do we celebrate people's achievements, that they did some great stuff teaching, that they got a really neat publication, they have a new book out or something like that. How do we actually do things there that would be better and get to know each other as people? So I think that's probably one kind of thing. People have commented about, in terms of how we view each other on these sorts of things. And if I may, I will give a little example of something that happened in our department in psychology that I think actually helped, not as burnout per se, but would fit within this. And this was when Karen DeValoy was chair. And she was working, with the staff in the main office. We were in Tobin Hall at that time. It's no longer there. And she, was asking, she said to the staff on it, okay, it's coming this spring and we're going to have, the annual staff picnic where we celebrate the staff. And that would go to Tilden Park somewhere, and we, it was supposed to be that the faculty were flipping the hamburgers and, serving the potato salad and stuff like that to the staff as a way of saying, we really appreciate your work. Well, she picked up a kind of, so, okay, we're gonna do this. And they're going, really, because sometimes people were not, I remember faculty waiting to be served, at those things rather than doing it. But anyway, so she said, well, it doesn't sound like there's enthusiasm about it. We really do think you're doing a great job in the department. How could we do a better job of that? And they said, well, let's not have hamburgers and potato salad from these big vats, and stuff out in the park. Could we have a nice lunch? Could we have a really interesting kind of thing? And so somebody volunteered their apartment that was nearby. Everybody had to bring potluck, and of course you're not going to bring yucky food, you're going to bring something really special. They had some wine, and we had a lunch at somebody's house where everybody was just getting to know each other. It's not staff being served by faculty one day out of 365, which is sort of demeaning right there. But people got to talk to each other, they enjoyed it, they said, this is much better. And with the money that, Karen said, okay, we're not gonna buy that kind of stuff, we're gonna do potluck. What could we do with the money we set aside? Well, could you fix up the lounge, the staff lounge? Could we get a new carpet? And then the next year it was something else. And what happened was it changed the dynamics of the relationships, because now people got to know each other as human beings rather than that secretary, that professor, whatever. And so the relationship at work began to change. If you know someone and they're coming in with an emergency, you have a different way of talking with them than what was happening before. They got to know each other, they discovered their kids were in the same school, or they both, a couple of people had the same sports team they liked, or whatever. But it changed the dynamics for a while, and it was really amazing, because when I talked with the staff, they were really saying, wow, you could really say, I'm sorry, it's 5 o'clock, and you just came in with a grant proposal, which is due today. Can't be done. Can we do some other thing to kind of deal with this? So there was another, so there were things in which they kind of identified what could we do, and then, solve the problem. Or another time, I remember the secretarial staff were saying, we've got too much work. It's just getting overloaded. We're working during lunch hour. We're having to stay late. We're not getting overtime, to get the work done. And I think Carolyn was the one who really worked on this. And what they discovered as they analyzed it was that the workload hadn't really changed much. But so why were they falling behind? It was because of the disruptions in the department, the big department office in Tolman, that was happening. And what would happen is everybody would come in and out. That's where you picked up your mail. That's where you dropped off the leftover pizza from your lab meeting. Then that's where you got the supplies, and you would then chat with people or tell them a joke. And some of it was fun and whatever, but it meant that you couldn't get work done. And by the time lunch rolled around, you were already behind. So what they did at the time was to put a sign up and decided that the office would be closed to everybody except the staff working in there from 8 to 10 in the morning. And there would be a sign if there was a delivery where to, go for it. They got a head start. They just got going and got stuff, and by the time the doors opened and then you could have the pizza and the jokes and the mail delivery and everything like that, people were ready for it and you could enjoy it rather than saying, I can't do it right now, kind of thing. And that worked for a long time. It really made a difference, in terms of the staff feeling that, working hard and we're just falling behind and, and we're not getting recognized and we're not getting paid for what we're doing and all that kind of stuff. It really changed the dynamic. So that would be another example that I could point to. It's kind of trying to identify where are those chronic stressors, where are the pebbles in your shoe? What are the things, you know, which also, I like the phrase, because it doesn't mean it's this big thing like redesigning healthcare for the 21st century, you know, what that's gonna be. But what is the little stuff, the non-sexy stuff that just drives us nuts all the time, that takes us away, you know, we're doing dumb stuff and you know, things that nobody's ever gonna read or stuff, rather than working with the students or taking care of the patients or the clients or something like that. And then trying to see what kind of changes could we make that would make it, you know, work better. And asking people who have to live with those changes rather than imposing them from above, I think is critical. So it's kind of basically, I'd say, people are always saying, do I have to go and say I'm burned out in order to get accommodation? I'm saying, you don't want to do that because you're going to get stigmatized and finger pointed. What's your problem? Nobody else has it. But to reframe it as, so how could we make things a little better around here? That takes it off people and just sort of say, how could we improve things? Are there things that, you know, kind of annoy most of us? If I'm the only one annoyed, then I have a different conclusion. I don't belong here, I'm gonna find another place. But having it like an annual checkup, you know, and sort of see, so where are we now? What's working well? Leave it alone, don't mess with it. Where do we have some problems? What could we do to come up with a better idea? I have seen way too many good intentions by people running businesses and organizations who think they know what will be the answer, and they implement it, sometimes at a big cost, lots of money, but they've never checked with their employees as to whether this is something that would be helpful or not. So I had, you know, one guy who said, I want a healthy whatever, and he put a volleyball court on the roof of their building, great expense. And when I interviewed the employees, it was kind of like, are they up there using the volleyball court? No. Do they have time off yet? No. Could they have spent the money on something else? Yes. You know, that would have made a real difference. So, you know, again, it's, you know, how do we identify what we can agree on and be on the same page on something that would begin to make life a little bit better on this, rather than, so it's not so much who is burning out, but why. And when we get to the why question, then it takes it off the back of the finger pointing, you know, and the stigma, which is there, because people will, no matter, even though World Health says it's not a disease, it's not a clinical illness, in general, people view it as a mental illness. And they're talking about what's your symptoms, your diagnosis, you should get medications, you should see a doctor, a psychiatrist, et cetera, and it's a stress response to chronic stressors. There's a different approach that we really need to take if we are concerned about people's well-being. So it's a long answer, but I hope that helped. Okay, yes, Eve.
This is a bit more of a, like general question actually, maybe also for Paula, which is, I could talk forever about burnout with you, kind of.
Yeah.
But I am wondering, you know, the generation now, it's such a different, like we, as I said, we stand on your shoulders, and I also am curious, how do you see the role of like women and feminism now in terms of, you know, what are our partnerships, our allyships? You know, there are so many social movements right now where there's such inequality, so much difficulty, and just curious, how do you see kind of what, you know, the contemporary generation of women, what's our roles and responsibilities? How do you feel like things have changed?
It's a interesting question, a tough one to answer in some ways. And I think there's a tendency to sort of view different generations as being different folks, not like us,
Right.
you know, kind of thing, like the, you know, male, female kind of thing. And I think, again, it turns out there's actually more in common, you know, to be shared there and something like that. But you have to realize that younger generations have grown up in very different circumstances. They have incredible crippling debt, you know, just for getting education. You know, the inequalities that you're talking about, you know, the climate change issues, and, you know, there's a lot of stuff, you know, people, you know, not being able to make it on one job and then having to do two, and, you know, and how are they gonna do all of that? So we have to really understand kind of where people are coming from in terms of that. At some level, I think there's been a lot of attention on trying to make it more equitable to be able to surface some of the issues on this. I worry for women that we're heading backwards,
Mhm.
you know, that when I'm hearing these things about the kitchen and you know, the healthcare, the abortion and stuff like that, I think, wait a minute, what is happening here? Women are getting too uppity, you know, and how that gets worked out within the workplace is really an interesting, you know, kind of issue. Again, what I have found in general with burnout is that it takes social units, a we response, rather than just a me, you know, kind of response.
Yes.
That there needs to be some way to find people that we can begin to talk with and figure out, can we come up with some better solutions and how could we, you know, do this kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, years ago, I began to worry on campus when I would talk to female students, and they thought all that discrimination stuff is gone. I mean, it's done, right? I mean, you guys had to go through it, but no, it's fine now. And yet you would hear examples of no, it's not, you know, and how they were getting, you know, harassed in the chemistry lab or, you know, whatever it happened to be, was saying we still have those kind of issues. So I don't know if we're going to get more of a rebound, you know, in some of that, but those are really, you know, core issues on that. I think my sense is with the younger generations is that they are more well aware of the problems and they want them to be better. And a lot of what we were seeing after the post-pandemic, when people said, I don't want to commute again, I don't want to leave, I like working from home, and apparently my work got done, so why, you know. And so they're more advocating much more strongly for a more integrated, balanced lifestyle. They're making more demands around that. They're more willing to walk from a job that is not going to give them a, you know, allow them to lead a good life, you know, in that respect, you know, in that respect. So, and I do think that a lot of the core psychological needs that we know about are still true for them. It may take a different form in some sense on that, but, you know, to have autonomy, to be belonging somewhere, to feel competent, you know, psychologically safe. I think that's still a big one that we need to work more on, especially for women. But you know, the fairness, the meaning in life, the positive emotions, I mean, that's always a big kind of one. But when people can find companionship and camaraderie and so forth, and we can do this, we can whatever, I think it's better. And so I worry about institutional, you know, mechanism we have which still focus only on the individual. And it's not because I'm not concerned about individual differences or individual whatever, but it's the sort of thing where, like performance reviews. Okay, Eve, you're gonna come in for your performance review and we're gonna see how you are doing. It makes it very difficult for the whole office to say, we've got a problem, could we fix that? You know, rather than saying this person, that person, this, you know, kind of thing. There's not a mechanism. How do you bring that forward? How do you talk about the fact that the manager, you know, is not giving good feedback and is being, you know, kind of nasty and sexist, etc. You need help and strength in numbers. And so developing that, I think, is going to be really critical. Okay. Are we done? Oh my gosh. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you very much. I was going to introduce a whole other question, but we can talk about that, about Facebook and things like that, and its consequences as stressors, but we'll talk about that in